Unlike the first game, I had never actually played F.E.A.R 2. There wasn't a specific reason, I guess it just never came up. I certainly had an Xbox 360 around the time it came out, but I must have been playing other games. I did a little research to see what would have come out around the same time, and yeah, there was no chance F.E.A.R 2 was getting any of my attention on release. I had read a few things about the sequel being disappointing, but I wanted to form my own opinion with as little outside interference as possible. F.E.A.R 2 actually has an interesting development cycle. While Monolith Productions was working on F.E.A.R, they were acquired by Warner Brothers. Monolith still had a contractual obligation to publish F.E.A.R with Vivendi Sierra, but that's why Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate were developed by Timegate Studios. Once F.E.A.R was released, Vivendi retained the rights to the name F.E.A.R, but Monolith and Warner Brothers had the rights to the story, characters, and pretty much everything else. Warner Bros. Would eventually secure the rights to the name F.E.A.R, allowing the sequel to be named properly. If they had not been able to use F.E.A.R, they were planning on calling the game Project Origin, the product of an online contest they held where fans suggested names for the new game. While initially approving the plot of the expansions, Monolith took a step back and reconsidered while planning their sequel to the beloved shooter. They decided to retcon the expansions and made a true sequel instead, something that would go on to cause a lot of confusion among fans when the game was released. Another piece of information I learned was that originally there were two different versions of this game in development, one for PC and one for the Xbox 360. Ultimately, the PC version was cancelled, and Monolith put full focus on the Xbox 360 release. The gameplay, while still feeling like F.E.A.R, was brought more in line with the FPS releases of that era, such as the Modern Warfare games. Let's get some of the bad out of the way early. If you enjoy playing shooters on a low sensitivity, like I do, you're gonna struggle a bit if you play the game vanilla. Out of the box, or the cloud, the game has a mouse acceleration issue that can be fixed by easily downloading a shady DLL file from some guy on the Steam discussion board. And just like that, great. Now let me map my melee to my side mouse button, and so I can't use my side mouse buttons? Alright, well, I guess that's not the worst thing in the world. Wait, press E to interact, but Q and E are used for... They did it. They removed the leaning mechanic. In the arms of the angel. So with all that out of the way, what is this game actually about? F.E.A.R 2 starts about 30 minutes prior to the ending of the first game. You play as Michael Beckett, a sergeant in a Delta Squad unit. With the crisis at Armacham HQ still ongoing, you were tasked with bringing Genevieve Aristide into protective custody. From the first game, we know her as the president of Armacham. Getting to her is gonna be difficult, as an ATC Black Ops force is after her as well, led by a new character, Colonel Vanek. This is where we get our first taste of the combat in this game. While not bad, it isn't as fun as the original. They included a new cover system where you could push and flip objects to use as cover. It's not really that great, and it mainly just becomes an interesting way for the player to proceed through the level. Usually by pushing something out of the way or flipping a bookshelf over to get through a doorway. We fight our way to the penthouse to uncover some weird shit. Unfortunately, during this rescue, the events from the first game catch up with us, and the facility explosion knocks us unconscious. Beckett wakes up in a hospital after undergoing some horrific experiments. This is where the horror elements really start to pick up. We find out that Project Harbinger is an attempt by Armacham to turn regular people into psychic commanders, much like F.E.A.R from the first game. We uncover the true horror of this experiment and what the failed experiments turn into. We're contacted by a guy with the codename Snake Fist, who claims he wants to help us. I have some trust issues with IT guys in this game, but this one seems alright. The humor in this game does kind of fall flat sometimes, especially when he makes this joke.
You're like free pizza at an anime convention.
Snake Fist provides most of the straightforward exposition in this game, and I'm happy for that because, to be honest, I'm not reading all this shit. Alright, Let's speedrun the rest of this story from memory. There is a secret facility under a school, we find Snake Fist, and then the game continues the trend of taking things away from me.
Now, let's get the hell out of here.
Then gives me one of the best QuickTime encounters I've had in pretty much any video game that ends with us blowing the Colonel's head off with his own shotgun. There is a thing on an island that can help destroy Alma. We get ambushed by replicas, Keegan wanders off, and I follow him in a game of hallucination hide-and-seek, and eventually get back to the truck to have one of the most boring shootouts of all time. This is where the game takes a bit of a weird turn. We reach the facility, Stokes and Beckett enter, she straps Beckett in, Genevieve turns on them, locks Beckett in the vault with Alma, who proceeds to assault him? The scenes aren't graphic, but they're certainly disturbing. Personally, I think we're going to need a twit longer for this one. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I care way more about the gameplay than I do about the story. So, does F.E.A.R 2 hold up in that regard? Kinda? I've read that the designers took feedback from the first game and used it to improve the second, and I could kind of see that. Not a ton has changed from the original combat formula. I still forgot to use reflex time for most of the game. The level design is a lot more open, which was a response to a complaint about the original, but I didn't really feel that way. I enjoyed the tight corridors and office settings. It made the game feel more claustrophobic. Overall, aside from the absence of leaning, the game plays mostly the same. It's just not as fluid. It feels a lot stiffer and a bit clunky at times, but I attribute that to the PC port. I have the same complaint about most Xbox 360 era games. We see a lot of the same guns come back from the original, including the nail gun.
It doesn't sound right when you say it that way.
We were both playing with the nail gun.
Nailing people to the wall is still a good time. The plasma rifle is weird now. Instead of turning one person into a skeleton in Red Mist, it affects a bunch of people, which is awesome, but it's also the only real upgrade in terms of weapons in this game. The assault rifle and shotgun both feel inferior to their F.E.A.R counterparts. And don't even get me started about what they did to the laser rifle. One thing I really enjoyed a lot was the inclusion of the mech sequences. Although, one of the two sequences was ruined because the level floor just didn't spawn in for some reason. I could have restarted and tried again, but who has that kind of time? These are probably the most fun I had with the whole game. Even though the mouse acceleration turned back on only while using the mech, it was fine. More games need mech sequences is the takeaway from this. So after much consideration, I would say that F.E.A.R 2 is just okay. And you know what? That's okay. Because not every game has to be groundbreaking. Not every game needs to be innovative and set standards in the industry. F.E.A.R 2 is fun, and it even does some things better than the original. I did very much enjoy the characters. The game made me feel genuine emotion watching, well, at least two of them die. In conclusion, if F.E.A.R was a John Woo action movie with Japanese horror inspiration, F.E.A.R 2 is a Michael Bay action movie with horror inspired by Saw. And I'm fine with that. Thanks for watching.